Okay, so welcome to today's webinar. Today's webinar is going to be where we'll talk about sort of the traceability and transparency in practice. So not only about theory, but also about the steps which can be taken, to implement traceability, to implement transparency for your agribusiness, for your company, and sort of how you can utilize it to make sure that your company benefits from it. Today, the key speakers are going to be Matea. She is the CEO of Anteja Africa. We are the company that is organizing these webinars, and our guest is going to be Susan Mugura, who is an expert on traceability and agribusiness processes, and she will be doing she will introduce you to sort of traceability in practice. Okay, so about Antea, we are a company with over 15 years of experience working on development of value chains, development of clusters for the World Bank, for the IFC, for the European Commission, and have worked all over East Africa as well as all over Europe and West Africa. We have our office in Nairobi, Kenya, where you can get in touch with us for any further interactions in the future. And what we are really at Antea Africa pushing is to work sort of on empowering the African agribusiness, because we see it as a sort of critical link between the farmer and the markets, so that we can make these value chains prosper through transparency, through enabling these sort of traceability processes. And these webinars are a way of us to spread our vision, to spread our messages to you. Okay, so first of all, maybe I would like to ask Matea to give a few words about herself and about her experience. So that, yeah, please, Matea.
Yeah, thank you, Jon, and hello, everybody. It's my name is Matea, and I am keen and really devoted to the innovation in agriculture in Africa, working in East Africa for about, I don't know, 50 years or something. In particular, keen, to use agriculture and the plants, for new implications in different mode, not only for food but also for the cosmetics, maybe for the medicine. And so it's in all my years working in Africa, I was engaged in the value chains, and try to understand what we empower African agribusinesses to really engage in the regional trade in East Africa and Africa. So, and then it's to inspire myself and also the community. A decade ago, I participate in the book, which is called The New Harvest, Agriculture in Innovation in Africa. And it took some time, but now we are really seeing, how the innovation is really hitting, and also COVID. It is terrible things to start, and what we experienced last year, but it offers a lot of opportunities, many opportunities to African agribusinesses. About this, you see a team which is engaged in Antea Africa, and down there I am planting the macadamia, one of my favorite fruits. Jon, I think that you can go further.
Yeah. So I would also like to kindly ask Susan to give a few words about herself. And as I said, she is the real expert in agribusiness processes and traceability. So I think that Susan can give a few more words about that on her own. Please, Susan.
Okay, good day, everyone. Thank you for having me as a guest on this webinar. I've been in agriculture, agribusiness for the last more than 20 years in East Africa, mainly with expertise in food safety, food quality, post-harvest handling, standards and certification. In this picture, there's a project that I'm doing in Tanzania, where we train and empower growers, youth and women groups and on food safety, post-harvest handling to reduce post-harvest losses. That's something that I like to speak about because it also has an effect on food security. And so there's a lot of work that we are doing in Tanzania about this with the International Trade Center, and that's something that I enjoy doing. Thank you, Yon.
Thank you, Susan. Okay, so I think that now, I would just like to invite everybody to participate in a few questions that we have prepared. So you can either scan this QR code with your mobile phone and try to get the access to the questions, or I would just like to ask my colleague Martina to enter the URL link to these questions to the chat so that everybody has the opportunity to get to the questions and provide their feedback. So please go ahead. Let me know if you have any issues doing it. Okay.
The link is in the chat as well. If you need to click it, or you can scan the QR code and enter a Mentimeter. And when you enter the Mentimeter, you will see a first question on your screen. Jon, if you can give me the share screen option,
Absolutely.
I can share my screen.
Perfect. So that we can see the answers. Great. So let me just do that right away. Okay. So go ahead. Okay, so we have 6 answers already for the first question. So the first is, how familiar are you with the concept of traceability? Okay, so I would say that we can see that the most popular response at the moment is, I have some understanding of it. Okay, so the answers keep coming in. That is great. Thank you for all who participate. Okay, so I would say that the majority has at least some understanding of it. So I think that this webinar will serve you great, to really get a much deeper understanding of it. Let's move on to the next question. Okay, how familiar are you with the concept of transparency? So not traceability, transparency. Okay. Okay. So it seems that more people, okay, more people are answering. Okay, a very balanced responses, I see. So let's give it a few more seconds if anybody else is joining in to provide the answers. Okay, so it looks like I like it, the most of you are very familiar with it. Okay, great. So next question, please. Okay, how relevant are transparency and traceability for your business at the moment? So this is a more sort of, okay, very much relevant, very much relevant. Okay. A unanimous vote, I see. Great. So that is why we are here today. Perfect. Good. And thank you, Martina, for this. We will get back to the questions also at the end of the presentation so that we can collect some responses and your feedback on the webinar itself. So Martina, I would like to kindly ask you to give me the host rights back so that I can share the presentation screen again, please.
I think you should be able to share your screen again.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So The key topics that we wish to cover today include sort of the traceability and transparency that we discussed in general, sort of the topics of how these two things are related and how these two things can help leverage each other so that you can get the maximum benefit from them. And then sort of the opportunities that transparent agribusinesses have. And the transparency stress test is something that we will demonstrate at the end, which is a tool that can help you, to start off your transparency journey, so to say, so that we also give some practice, so that we can push in practice what we are going to discuss today. So I would like to really kindly invite now Matea to give a brief introduction on the topic.
Thank you, Jon. Yeah, brief introduction. It's about a year we will start completely different, but what we are observing now is that value chain transparency, this means end-to-end from farmers to the fork, or at least to the buyers, becoming a top, not only top strategy, but really, and the conversation, but also the actions which we are seeing implemented in Europe, United States, but increasingly in East Africa. When we are talking to the companies, it is almost 100% of companies, and also what we see today with our short survey, it's really on the agenda of all companies. And what is maybe not so clear is that things are doing with the sustainability impacts. It's how to use it, to really prevent environment, make a social impact, and how to use it to build an ecosystem of partners which can improve only together supply chain visibility and traceability along the value chains. Because it's become very clear, not only through the research, but in the practice in the last months, let's say from really in the COVID time, that the partners along the value chain has to address the problem or the challenge or even the opportunity together. Jon?
Yes.
Okay, and it's if you go to the literature or a Google, or I don't know, it's also in the conversation, it's not really clear, and people are using terminology for the same things for the same time, but the truth is they are not really the same. One is traceability, which means I am tracking something from one point to another, and from this another point back to the first. And transparency is actually about the disclosure of information. It's about the communication, what you did along the value chain. So this means, for example, that we have input suppliers, I do have farmers, I do have traders, and I do have consumers in the end. I can track, track the information, I can track the material flow, I can track, for example, value sharing along the chain. But once I do have this under control, I can communicate, I can become transparent along the value chain, and I can communicate this among my partners in the value chain, but also what is extremely important, I communicate this to my stakeholder. Something is traceability and something is transparency. People are using both words many times as to explain the same things, but the truth is they're not the same. Traceability means tracking, transparency means disclosure. So disclosure, it's communication. And when I track traceability, this means that I can track information, I can track material flow, I can track how the value is sharing, and I can track this from one point to another in the value chain. And once I understand what is going in the value chain, I can become transparent. So I can communicate information to my partner in the value chain, or also outside the value chains to the stakeholders like its regulator, NGOs, consumers, and so on. Jon? And why this is actually so important, it's hard to say that traceability and transparency were invented by COVID, far away not. However, it's become even more important because the consumer and regulators and other stakeholders become very, very sensitive when it comes to environmental and social responsibilities. It's going so far that, for example, in 2020, Tesco, Sainsbury, and Lidl literally drop avocado supplier from their stores because it comes out that the provider abused the human rights in his value chain. In addition to this, Mars, Nestle, and Hershey, so big producer of chocolate, was accused that they are using child labor in their value chain. And the main problem was, that this child was supposed to do in the good environment, to earn some money, but it comes out that they were pure slavery. This will be just the final of the introduction. Traceability and transparency is not something which really jeopardize the value chain and the company. It is actually extreme opportunity, and the research shows that consumers can pay up to 10% more for the products which from the brands, which are transparent and are cautious about the sustainability, about environment, and their social impact. So, Susan, I will give you a word on this point that you can continue with the traceability topic.
Thank you, Matea, for setting the stage, because indeed, one is dependent on the other, and the process of implementing your traceability then becomes very important, because that is the information that you use to communicate with the market. And so for this presentation, we will look at traceability and really how to put the system in place, so that then you're able to move on to the level of transparency and you communicate this information to the market. So a traceability system allows an organization to document or to locate a product through the stages and operations involved in the manufacture processing, basically throughout the value chain. Everything that you're doing at each step of the chain then enables you as an organization to be able to record this, to be able to show what you're doing, demonstrate what you're doing in terms of practices, whether for certification or not. It is a way to actually just demonstrate that you are doing what you're doing at each stage of the production. And therefore, eventually, it can be used to facilitate identification of non-conformities when they occur, okay? And if the non-conformities occur and then you need to withdraw or recall the product, then with traceability, you're able to only recall or withdraw only the affected batch. So again, this means that if you have a system, a traceability system that is robust, you will be able to only withdraw the affected batch, and you will be able to identify it easily and quickly before there's any negative or adverse effect on the market because of your product. So what are the main approaches to traceability? We have four. And the first one, of course, is the customer approach. We all are in the production of goods that are going to meet our customer requirements. So if we are able to implement a traceability system, then we are able to prove that there's a match between customer requirements, and we're able to establish trust with our consumers. We're able to then have development of the product's production within and the distribution chain, and there's clarity in everything that we're doing. When we look at the food safety approach, it makes it possible to reliably find products and product history. So traceability in and of itself does not assure food safety. What it does is to be able to actually show and demonstrate and be able to, for you as a producer, to provide reliable information about your product, and to be able to trace your product and make sure then that you have a chain of custody, that you have a flow of your product without mixing with product that has not followed the same system that you have implemented within your entity. We also have the regulations approach, and with the regulations approach, it is where you are required to implement by the regulatory authority. So we have the EU regulations 178/2002, which is on traceability, but there's also traceability requirements by the national competent authorities. I mean, for example, in Kenya, in horticulture, we have the National Horticulture Traceability System. For the most of the standards require a chain of custody. I mean, Global Gap, Rainforest Alliance, they all have chain of custody requirements. Again, So this again, beyond the regulations, also is part of the standard requirements for certification standards. And then finally, the company management approach, because whether or not you're going into certification, there are benefits for implementing traceability within your system, because it allows you to have proper supply chain management, to introduce operational efficiencies within your value chain and within your operations, to enable you to have some savings from having better, from being more efficient, and from being able to actually stand out. Because one, you will be, I mean, the current market environment, there's heavy competition. There's heavy competition for sources, for products, and, etc., for raw materials. Secondly, we have complex market systems, because there's a lot of supply points from the north to south trade. I mean, we're sourcing from different avenues, whether it is raw materials and eventually even from different producers. So for you to be able to have a proper approach as a company, then again, you'll be able to see that traceability will be able to help you improve on your overall efficiency. So what are the steps that we need to put into place to have an efficient traceability management system? A company will have to, the first step is to be able to identify all your production steps, whether it is production on the farm or your processing entity or manufacturing steps. You need to identify all the steps and put this in a flow chart. Then from these, for each of the steps, you will need to check what is the input in terms of the source of the components, who is supplying you, if you're a farmer, your source of seed, your source of fertilizers, your source of pesticides, etc. So you need to have all this information at every chain, depending on what's coming in. And for everything that's coming in, obviously there's an output. So at some point it will be records. At some point it will be the product itself in crates or in batches, and so on and so forth. So that's what you need to identify. So the source of all the components within the identified steps and their suppliers. And then thirdly, you need to also identify the place, the product and its components. Where are they stored? What are the controls or tests carried out on the product and its components? Then you need to also clearly identify the equipment that is used to make and handle the product. And finally, the direct customers who you supplied your product to, or who consumed your product. So it's one step forward, one step back. You need to know where your raw materials came from and who you supplied your product to. And that is really the basic and the basis for the traceability system. And so what, in a nutshell, this means is that, just go back one step back, we're talking about product identification. That's primary. And that's the key thing I would like us to take out of here. Product identification. And secondly, very important, information. Yeah, we have all these steps, as we've seen, require a lot of information gathering. And how you're gathering and recording this information is critical, because this information is what will then be used to track the movement of the product or the item through the supply chain. And finally, to be able to establish a link between the product and the supply chain participants. So in a nutshell, this is what it says, that we must have product identification, then we must have the information properly managed, properly recorded, and finally, that's what then will be used to link the product with the consumer or with the other supply chain markets. And this then means that there are two types of traceability. One, the external traceability, which means that all traceable items are uniquely identified. They are all uniquely identified. And that is something visible, what we see. It could be the barcode, what is actually seen. So it's a unique product identification number. It has a badge, it has a lot number, okay? And then the internal traceability is where most of us belong within this system. Either you are implementing it within your company, so it's the internal, what processes you are maintaining as an enterprise, okay, to be able to have the identities of the raw materials and match them with the finished goods, okay? And then when one material is combined, again, because, for example, if you're making a blend of a tea blend, for example, I know we have tea people here, then you're able to actually have your even if you have a composite product, either way, you should be able to track and to trace and track the different components that come into making that blend. This is really important. So that is within the internal system. And what we will see externally is the batch code, the lot number, or the identification. That's the unique ID. And the information that is tracked is drawn from that is what you have built in within your internal traceability system. So the key principles of traceability: one, identifying your product, tracking by lot. You must have a unique identification, okay? Two, managing these links. What's the link between the operations? When you have mapped out your operation, how then do you link the two through records? And this is that means you have to have data. You have to define what data needs to be recorded, what information needs to be recorded at each stage of the operation, because then this is what you communicate and associate the information flow with the product flow. I've made reference to ISO 22005 for this, the traceability standard. And just to summarize what we have said in terms of the principles and the requirements is: one, we need to be able to trace the flow of the materials, okay? The ingredients, the packaging, etc., everything that goes into the making of the product, the final product. Then we have to identify what is the necessary documentation that is required and track, and what is required to track for each stage of the production or the process. Then you have to ensure there's adequate coordination between the different actors involved. You have to improve communication among the involved parties, and then you have to enhance the appropriate use and reliability of information, effectiveness and productivity of the organization. So the backbone of your traceability system is based on these 5 elements. And once you have these 5 elements in place and you're able to have a very robust traceability system, only then can you move to transparency and be able to communicate this information to interested parties. Okay, so step by step for an enterprise, what do you need to do is: one, you need to first define the scope of your traceability system. So if you are only involved in farming operations, then we are talking about here from seed to harvest, okay, to farm gate. If at all you also have a packing facility, then again, it will be from seed to the packing facility. So here, if you're doing your own transportation, the distribution, etc., this again is included when you map out your supply chain. Then for you to be able to determine the information needs that feed into your traceability system, you have to decide on the optimal batch size. And for most farming entities, I'll use a farm enterprise, you have your plot number, you've mapped out your farm, and you have blocks where you have the blocks are labeled, whatever labeling system you use, and each block can then be a batch size. It could also be that within that block, the operations carried out are similar, everything was planted on the same date, or whatever processes are done at the same time, then that constitutes your batch. But it is in terms of location, it is coming from that block or farming or that plot. Then number 3, you then identify what is the traceability information needed, okay? And here we talk about all the records you have that pertain to that production system, from seed, fertilizer, etc. If it comes to the processing part of it, what are the inputs that you put in? And here we're talking about, this will include any post-harvest treatments. It also includes your packaging material. It includes also the human resource, the personnel who will come into contact with that product. We need to know who worked on it, who packaged that particular batch, which shift was if you're working in a shift system, who was on duty, etc. Then you identify the period for keeping the traceability records, and you must have a record retrieval procedure, establish procedures for reviewing and testing the traceability system, because for your traceability system to work, then you need to test how whether it is working. You need, and some standards actually require, most standards require that you conduct a mock recall. And in a mock recall, what will happen is that you will then identify a batch or a lot. You'll identify something, and then you will communicate that to your market, and you will see whether your market is able to actually retrieve it. Only then, that way you've tested your traceability system, if it is working or not. Then this is a routine procedure. Most standards require that you do it once a year, but that's also for your own comfort, that after putting in this whole system, then that it can work for you, that you're able to withdraw or recall a product. Then that means that your system is working. And then you have number 6, document the traceability system. So in a nutshell, 1, you have to create an operations diagram. That's what I've said. And 2, you have to document the procedures to be followed. So here we have, for example, reception and warehousing. Here we are mapping out the process. And here you receive all the inputs, whether it is seed. Here is in a farming system, for example, you bring in the seed, you have the plant protection products, you have fertilizers, etc. And that is the reception and warehousing. You have records for that. Then you have your planting and production records. You have your harvesting and warehousing and transportation. You have reception, sorting and packing. You have warehousing, storage and shipping. And these are steps that you will map out depending on your specific entity, and then define the records, list all the inputs and outputs, and define all the requirements for each stage, and then establish records for that. So traceability in practice, Jon, I think we covered this already, that we identify the plots in every farm, capture the information, okay, briefly describe what is done in every stage, capture the production inputs, and then identify the batches, the lots, identify, assign a batch or lot number, and then this is what is used to package your information that then feeds into your traceability system. And that's what you use to communicate. So what are the procedures to be followed for each stage? Again, we will identify the type of activity by name. The good thing about numbering is that it helps you in terms of being able to have the sequence of the steps and to know what is required, describe what is done at each activity, identify and assign a person responsibility. Again, this system is driven by people. Even when you have a digital system, again, you still have somebody who is taking the records or feeding the records often. And especially in our rural settings, you still, in our production system, you still have a manual record keeping, which you will then transform into whatever other recording system that you have within you. And then you indicate where the data is stored. So the important and critical thing here is to be able to keep the field data through to the station. And here, as you can see, this is really basic. We have block 1B as an example. It's a block of beans, the variety, the date it was planted, the date it was harvested, okay, the area. And that means if we have the area, then we have an expectation of how much is going to come out from that particular block. And that information is what is used to be able to actually define the expectation for that block in terms of when you need to know the mass balance, how much came out of here, and how do we know that there's no mixing of product from other areas or from other sources, okay? And that same information at harvest is then transferred and recorded onto the crate that will go into the pack house. And this information again is translated throughout the packing station, on the packing table, and right up to the individual packing unit, whether it is a box, whether it is a punnet. This this transparent traceability information, then even from the PANET, can be traced back to block 1B. So in summary, based on why should you go into the into doing all this for your system? One is that this will be traceability forms a strategic tool that helps improve the quality of raw materials, because you're able to record everything. It will improve your inventory management and eventually become a source of competitive advantage. And from the transparency session that's coming up, we'll be able to see how this information that you have gathered within your traceability system, how you can use it then for your competitive advantage. From a consumer perspective, traceability helps to build trust, peace of mind, and increase confidence. I mean, right now we know even most products have a barcode which you can scan and check to confirm the authenticity of that product, whether it's a counterfeit or whether it's an original. You're actually able to do that. So from a consumer perspective on a daily basis, then this is really important. For the grower, traceability helps cost, eventually will have benefits for you for cost-effective quality management. And additional benefits include lower cost of distribution, reduced recall expenses, and then again, you're able to have your product. If you have a unique attribute in your product, then you're able to expand the sales of your product with the attributes that are difficult to design. And specifically for if you have a certified product, if you have something that is organic, something unique that you have put within your product, then you're able to help your market to communicate this to your market, and then actually prove that the source of your raw materials and the source of your products and production then is actually authentic and meets the requirements of what you want to supply or to assure to your consumer or to your customer. And with this, Matea, we can then, I hand over to Matea, who will tell us about the transparency and how this information will translate to communication to your market. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. This was brilliant. Thank you very much. We also see in a chat that there is some request for the information. Yes, we will share it. But now, for those who are really now, I would say, a bit scared how difficult it gets traceability, there is one good news is that you can be transparent even before you are fully traceable, and that you can use transparency as an empowering tool, to increase your trade. So it's still, you have to understand what is going on in your supply chain. And we will show you now how you can do it. Jon? So achieving transparency, what does it mean? This means that we understand what is going on in the value chains, that we are capable to visualize our supply chain, to understand who is who and who is doing something, that we know how to collect and document information, as it was explained by Susan, and in what is extremely important, that we are capable to identify issue and act. This means to be in the circle of continuous improvement of our supply chain, and then how to share the information. So this is the graph which was presented by the Harvard Business School, but I truly recommend to everybody to remember it, copy it, and I will explain what does it mean. So transparency means that we do have two axes. One is transparency milestone. This means how I'll improve my knowledge about my supply chain and my efficiency of the supply chain through the milestones. And the second axis show us how deep I'm going to understanding and engagement in my supply chain. So engagement in my supply chain means actually that I communicate, which is majority of the companies only, through my direct suppliers. And then I'm capable to go through this supply chain scope to the raw materials. What is good and what is really something that agribusiness in Africa can really use it, that they do have direct access and engagement with the raw material supplier. This means farmers. Because if you go to Europe, they will say, we know maybe what's going on with the traders. In addition, then, what is important about the transparency milestones? That you can have in your company code of conduct, how I do the business, you know, and then as explained by Susan, you can have a different standard and different certificates ready. That when you progress, you can have performance-based metrics. So how I improve, what I have to do, how I measure my engagement in the supply chain. Then it comes traceability. And in the end, then you can do the full disclosures. Now, this means that you can be transparent even if you do not have full traceability, but you can talk about your code of conduct, you can talk about your standards, you can explain how you will perform and how you will improve your engagement in the supply chain. So, Jon, can you go? Yeah. Here is the very important steps that is many times overlooked, and it's called visualization of the supply chain or mapping. So this means that I really understand who are the actors in my supply chain. This is example from the Moringa, for example, and that we know what kind of information and what kind of activities are performed in each step of the value chain. So here we see cultivation, harvesting, transport, washing, drying, milling, packaging, and going to the consumers. And once we do understand who are actors in the value chain, you know, we really start understanding where is the gaps in information, what kind of information I have to collect, and where I can improve. And once, you know, I do understand this, you know, even if I do not have full traceability, but maybe I do have the full code of conduct, or I have several organic standards, I do have HACCP, I do have, I don't know whatsoever. I can prepare it to and organize along my value chain. And I can use it, you know, I can do it by hand, you know, and then I can use several, and I can use the digital tools like we do with our Phyto app, that you can show where is your farmers, what kind of information I can display. And then, you know, as I mentioned, you know, something is mapping, you know, but then is acting. And you have to act on the things which are important and you detect during your mapping study. And this means what is the problems that I have which prevent me to increase my trade, and what is the problems that I might bump in because I do have some issue, probably maybe in a social part of the business, or my supply chain really that doesn't do much good for the environment. And once I know this and I can start acting, I can share and communicate very freely, you know, this is the steps that I will take on, that I will improve my weak points. And then, you know, I can communicate this in many ways, you know. And what we observe, you know, in the last year, you know, that companies actually doesn't use this. Many companies in East Africa, they have perfectly under control. They're working with farmers. They know how to do the quality product. They have a certification under control, but they just do not communicate this. And you can use it, you can go through the website, you can use social media, you can use, as we suggest, you can use the QR codes that you can put on the product, you can put it in your banners, whatever. There is a lot of many options that you can use it. Just need a bit of creativity and that you are sharing your information. And then, you know, it's just for those, please try to take your mobile phones and scan this code, and you will see how easy it actually is to communicate the information, which can extremely increase your trade. So take a moment, scan, and let us know if you get information on your mobiles. It should work in any mobile. Jon, can you follow this?
Yes. So it should work on any smartphone. So some smartphones have it integrated and in their camera application, or some might actually request that you have a scanner for this QR label, but in both cases, you can just see sort of an example that we prepared, which is covering the key information, you know, that the market wants to see about your products. And it's an easy way, you know, for you to communicate this, all these like details about the product, the origin, making sure that you can communicate about your production processes, that you can communicate the certificates and standards, that you can communicate your social responsibility practices, as well as your sort of positive environmentally friendly practices that you might have.
Okay, so I hope that you scan, you know, maybe if you get it, please just put on a chat that you get the information. You want to just go to the last slide. Okay, so now, you know, it's what does it mean? You know, here is an example of Mionga, the company which was, I don't know, 5 years ago, a startup, but with using transparency and traceability as a tool, you know, the company really managed in a very short time, in COVID time, you know, to get access to the buyers, even outside Kenya, in Middle East and in Europe, because they were capable, the company was capable to show this, it was transparent, and they were capable to show transparent traceability information. And this means, you know, that this relationship with the buyers that the company is getting is, it's going, let's put this, they can join the trust of the buyers in a much faster and much more efficient way. And they even, you know, use it, the transparency information in some trades and the retailer stores, which really boost the trade. And one of the first step, you know, go to the beginning is really to understand where are you standing in your transparency and traceability. So, and instead of, you know, to show you today the detailed presentation of digital tools, we would like to present you, we will ask for, Jon will facilitate this, we will ask for volunteer on this, but you know how to use transparency stress test to establish your very first position. And what is important here to remember, it's not only about the product, about the standard and origin of the ingredients. It's not only about the process, how I do, how I produce my products, but it's also about the social impact and environmental impact. So Jon, I think it will be extremely good that we demonstrate how to get engaged in the stress test to get the first idea where they are standing.
So thank you. Just firstly, I would like to touch a point that in the chat, I saw that some of you missed the scan. In the end of this webinar, I will go back so that you have another opportunity to take a scan of that and see for yourself how it works. In the meantime, I would like to ask for a volunteer who would like to participate with me for the this demonstration of the transparency stress test. And I see here one hands up from Robert. Is this okay?
Yeah, that is okay.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Robert. Welcome. Okay, so I will share my screen and this, we can go from there. So this stress test is a tool that we developed. It is about giving you, you know, sort of your initial understanding of I am situated here, so that it can be sort of the start of your roadmap to go from first idea of let's be more transparent to the point where you're utilizing transparency as a strategic sort of tool in your company. So Robert, let me know. I will guide you through the questions and you just give me a response. These are multiple choice questions and in the end you will get a score. So first question is regarding sort of the origin of the product. So do you know exactly where the product comes from? You know, the farms, do you know the farmers themselves? And about this, do you know it? Do you have it documented? Or are you even communicating this documented information about the product origin to the market, let's say?
I will go for the last one. We have the document and we know where it is coming from and we communicate it to our stakeholders. So the last one.
Okay, great. Okay, so the next question is the same, but with the actors involved in the value chain. Sort of, do you know who are you are working with some cooperatives, maybe you're working with associations or any other sort of entity in your value chain? So do you know these entities? Do you have them documented, or are you even communicating them?
We know the actors involved, and we know the value chain, the entities involved in the value chain. So we shall go with the second last.
So this one, perfect.
No?
Sorry?
Yes.
This one? Or here?
Correct, right?
This one?
Yeah, no, the way you have ticked is correct.
Perfect. Okay, so the next is about sort of procedures that you have to ensure quality. Do you have them documented? Are you communicating them? What is your status on sort of the procedures for the quality assurance?
Here it is the last one. We are communicating to our stakeholders and it's documented.
Perfect. And in regards to your products, do you have official sort of product specifications? Are you communicating them, or you don't even have them?
Yes, we have the specifications and we are communicating to our stakeholders. The last one.
Amazing. Good. And then it's sort of, do you have an overview of your sort of, this relies a bit also there on the traceability aspect of it. Do you have sort of a detailed overview from farm level to the final step?
Here, I'll go with the second last. We have them documented, and from farm to the selling point, the second last.
Okay, perfect. Then about your positive social impacts and social responsibility practices, is this something that you are not aware of in your company? Is this something that you would like, that you know, that you have documented, or that you are communicating? At what level are you in regards to this?
Here, I'm going with the second one.
Okay, great. Do you support farmers in improving their farming practices?
Yes, we do, and it is well documented. So it is the second last.
Great. Okay, so the second last question now. So it's in regards to environmental sustainability. So do you know how your company, how your operations are impacting the environment? And
here I'll go with the second one.
Okay, great. And then we have this aspect of traceability. So do you have a traceability system in place? Do you have it documented from farm onwards, or are you even communicating your traceability aspect?
This one, I'll go with the second last.
Okay, great. So let's see. Once we submit this, you will get a score. Okay, so you scored 74% on your transparency stress test, which means that this is something that your transparency still has room for improvement, but you are really on the right way. It is simply that you have to focus more on the application or sort of the communication of some of your procedures. With some of them, you need to document them. With some of them, you simply need to take the effort to communicate it to the market to make sure that you can leverage the information and the knowledge of your value chain that you have for the benefit of your company. So this is now, thank you for your participation. I hope that this was a good example, that this helped you, and hopefully this was a good demonstration, you know, of how you need to sort of take a step back in the beginning to evaluate your current situation, to evaluate your current state of transparency before you can start to make the plan on what are the future moves.
Thank you, John. Thank you, John.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Okay, so I think that I will just share this again. So Matea, if you want to take over, I think that we are coming to the end of this presentation.
Yeah, but basically, yeah, thank you, Jon. You know, it's my question is, if I may, Robert, go back to you and ask you if there are any surprise about what Jon comment on your transparency situation, or it was something that it was clear for you? I mean, he point out that it's really important that you improve your communication with the stakeholders, for example.
In fact, what I've seen from the result and from the comment from John is exactly what is on the ground with our company. And it is true. It is true. We are lacking in a little bit of the communication with our stakeholders. So this is perfect and is very, very correct.
Thank you so much, Robert. And we do have a couple, 3 more. No, we are at 11, but I still, if there is any question, we are open to take 2 or 3 questions, or you just put this on the chat and we will come back to you. Jon?
Yes, so I would like to invite everybody who might have a question, you know, you can unmute yourself, ask a question, and we are here to make sure that we give you the best answer possible. And in the meantime, I will just leave it here on the QR code so that people who did not have the opportunity to check it out yet can still do it. So if there are any questions, please go ahead. We are here to answer them. Okay, if not, as I said, we will send a follow-up email to this webinar. We will include I will include the link to the recording of this so that you can always refer back to this webinar, this presentation, for any sort of details. Otherwise, okay, I think that we got some questions. Let me see. Okay. Okay, so yes, I will share the details. I will share the presentation. I will share the recording. And if anybody would like, you know, to schedule sort of a short meeting where we can go through this transparency stress test with you, and sort of help you identify, you know, what are some of the next steps that you should take with your company. It would be great, you know, to just send us an email, reply to what I will send you, and we can move on from there.